Okay. Yeah. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay. Okay. Well, small group today. That's all right. We're going to go ahead and get started. This was one of the most popular topics that was requested at the Trestle meeting in particular that we had at Indiana. And it's been a really popular topic on the KU campus as well. We have a whole DEI action team going on campus. So we thought we would reach out to our community to talk about what you can do in your classroom to promote diversity and inclusivity. So just to kind of start, I wanted to throw in just a couple slides here talking about, why do we need to worry about DEI in STEM? And so some of the figures I'm going to show you here are from the 2017 NSF reports on women, minorities, and persons with disabilities in STEM. So if you look at the STEM workforce, and this is from 2015, you can see that it's pretty predominantly 50% white men. And then white women take up second place, second in the running with 18%, and then it breaks down with Asians, Blacks, Hispanics, and others. It's not representative of what the demographics look like US in terms of our, what's the word? Yeah, in terms of our demographics.
Right.
And we really want to see this improve. And so this has been kind of a really big topic of discussion across the nation and really globally on what we can do to change this. Again, this is US data, but if you look at STEM degrees, so this is showing you bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees that are earned by underrepresented minority women and men. So from 1995 to 2014. And you can see again, percentages are small. For bachelor's degrees, that's got up to about 12%. For master's degrees, it's up to about, I have a hard time looking at lines, 8%, and then for doctorates, there's only about 2 to 4%. An interesting trend here, though, is that you actually are getting higher levels of degrees earned by minority women than minority men. That's the opposite. If you look at degrees earned by white women and men, the numbers have actually been going down over time. And here, white men are still out earning STEM degrees versus white women. But the percentages are considerably higher than they were for the minority group. And then this graph always makes me a little sad. This is the number of, or percentage of early career doctorate holders with a STEM degree from 2014. And so just less than 5% across the board for anyone who's not white. And we really, really need to change that. We're missing out on so much potential representation like this. And then I wanted to quickly point out that this isn't just a problem at the undergraduate, graduate level. This problem starts in K through 12. I need to hide this so that it's, there we go. The figure here on the left-hand side is just kind of showing you that diversity diminishes at each point. And if you look at, again, this is US data, but enrollment for high school graduates and bachelor's degree students from 2011 to 2012, we have a disproportionate enrollment amounts. And there was a study done that shows that there's a disadvantage when you talk about access to STEM courses. So looking on the left here, just showing you the number of or percentage of high schools that offer math and science courses. Not all of them do. So you lose that range of access there. And so for me, I'm in earth science, and I know that a lot of high schools across the US don't teach earth science, which is really frustrating because then students get to an undergraduate level position and don't really recognize that this is a course or a topic that they could take. And then on the right here, you can see there's a graph that's just kind of showing you that it also, so different high schools have different levels of offering for STEM courses. And then students, based on where you live, the amount of funding that's coming into your school and stuff like that, have different access to these courses by race and ethnicity. So when this data was collected, Asian students have the highest access, about 81% to the full range of courses, whereas American Indian, Alaska Native have the lowest access. So this just like compounds the problem that's already happening. And then lastly, I also just kind of wanted to point out that not only do we have this compounded problem with access to classes, but there's also a big problem in terms of students see no diversity in the K through 12 levels. Predominantly the teachers that are in the classrooms are white, as you can see from this graph here. So they don't see diversity in actual science teachers. So it's, a big impact here is you don't have a role model showing you that I could do this too. So with some of that background information, I just kind of want to throw those on there too, because I know that sometimes we want to talk about this with other people, and it's nice to just know where some data is accessible that you can use. Feel free to use any of that, or I have all the websites on there just to go directly to the report. So we're going to talk about what can we do, all right? There is a link here to the CTE webpage. So this is the KU CTE webpage, and they have a whole, actually, let me just go ahead and show it to you. Can everyone see this webpage? Now I need to look at my grid. Thumbs up, yes? Okay, I'm on one screen here, so it's hard to tell what is working. CTE.ku.edu, they've actually made a page that talks about inclusive teaching. And they have a couple of additional resources that we're not going to cover here today, so I just wanted to kind of point out to you that if you want to learn about this a little bit more, there are some additional topics you can kind of dive into. But today in particular, we're going to talk about adopting inclusive teaching methods. This guy, as my highlighted screen shows. So inclusive teaching methods are methods that encourage active and collaborative learning, or cooperative small group learning, or problem-based learning. And I've kind of highlighted some of the keywords here. You're shrinking large classes to smaller groups in the same space, reducing isolation, and encouraging a sense of community and support. In addition, we know that these enhance critical thinking, improve student preparation, transform students into active learners. And then oftentimes inclusive teaching classrooms employ universal design. And just FYI, we're going to have our February brown bag covering the universal design topic. Amanda from University of California, Davis is going to lead that. So tune in next month and we will be recording that one as well. So now Drew is going to step in. Drew's been doing an amazing job over in the KU chemistry department and has really been working with faculty on how they can do this in their classroom. So he's going to give you some examples.
So I'm Drew. As she mentioned, I'm in the KU chemistry department. I'm a postdoctoral teaching associate there, and so my role is to work with faculty to help them try new things in their courses and update their teaching practices. I have one particularly DEI conscientious faculty member who is teaching Chem 170. His name is Christoph Kuchera. He's a really great guy. And this Chem 170 course is the course at a freshman level that is specifically for chemistry majors, chemical engineers, and biochemists. Students in other STEM disciplines take a different course. And so this is a smallish class here at KU. It's about 120, 110 students. And Christoph is pretty proactive in trying to figure out ways to work issues of DEI into the classroom. And so he came to me and said, well, you know, what can we do? Or I have this idea. And so we've done a few things that might be useful and that we've collected data on. You know, one of the easiest places that we found to start was just to ask students what their background is and what they were familiar with. And so that's really what this pre-post course survey is about. Along the lines of visibility, Blair mentioned that. We also developed this microbiographic assignment, and I'll tell you a little bit about how that went. And then the last thing was that we developed some in-class scenarios. What's on the slide says case studies, but I feel like case studies more like a real-world example. And we didn't pull any sort of literature about DEI out in the workforce necessarily, and any issues that might have come to sort of legal light We didn't do anything that sophisticated, but we did develop some scenarios in which some fictitious students are interacting, and some of these issues naturally arise the way they might in the class setting, and have students think about that. So I'm going to talk about each of these sort of briefly, one after the other. So in terms of this pre and post course survey, we called it People in Chemistry, and that's a lot of what the questions revolved around. One of the things that we asked them to do is to name an important or a famous chemist. And the reason for doing that in terms of, DEI was, one of the reasons for doing that was to kind of figure out who they named and what those people looked like. And maybe even at a more fundamental level, could they? I mean, these are our chemistry students. What do they know about the discipline? So it was sort of a multi-purpose type question. And we also wanted to know how they see themselves in the chemistry picture, which is sort of that second question. Are you a chemist now versus later? And then one of the other things that we put on this questionnaire was to see if they had a good understanding of what some of the language around DEI actually means. And so we asked them specifically about the word underrepresented, and what does that mean? And we got about 15% of students who really nailed it. There were another maybe 20 to 25 who were kind of ballparkish. And after that, about 60% of students kind of had no idea, which was news to us. We didn't really know that until we started asking. So in terms of seeing people like them, just seeing a diversity of people, I guess, as scientists, we put together this microbiographic assignment. And if an example of that is shown here, let me start out that way. So this is John E. Hodge, and it turns out he was here at the University of Kansas a while ago, did his master's degree here. And in terms of chemistry, a whole lot of people know about the chemistry that happens on the grill when you sear a steak, or maybe grill bread, peaches, whatever you might be doing. But you get these nice dark marks, right? So there's some kind of chemistry that happened to change it and make those marks appear. The most famous reaction that contributes to that is the Maillard reaction. But it turns out that our guy here at KU actually took that information and put it into this big, big picture about how this chemistry works, which is a really impressive feat. And it turns out he has his own name on this scheme, and it's called the Hodge scheme. A lot of people don't know about that, and it turns out they also don't know that it was an African-American chemist who did this. And moreover, he's from Kansas City, Kansas, which in terms of the Kansas City metro area is sort of a less affluent part of town. And so, this is a big accomplishment for somebody sort of from that background. And this is the example we give them, and they have to do the same thing. We give them a list of chemists where they can choose who they're going to talk about or highlight. And then they have to make this, which is a single slide that's very image heavy, and has a very short 2 to 3 sentence biography about who this person is. And that's where the name comes from, microbiographic. So students make these, and what happens is that we present the student work then in front of, we collect all of these student images, and we present them before class starts. They're up on the screen, so students can kind of connect with these different people, and sort of get a sense that accomplishments in chemistry occur as a result of everyone working on chemistry. It's not just white people who are highlighted in their book. It's not just men. So when we did this the very first time in 2016, we just gave the students a single list. And in terms of who they chose, there's a breakdown of that in this graph. About half of them chose a female chemist, which is great. That kind of matches, what's in the population. And You can see the breakdown here as well. About a quarter of them chose somebody who was African American, about 10% Jewish, etc. In terms of the numbers of communities who are being represented, we got about 6, and we thought that, well, maybe we could do better than that. And when we analyzed the student work for frequency, for who they chose as their person to discuss, most of the students were choosing chemists that were at the very top of the list. Right, it was just an assignment. They were kind of cranking through it, and so we restructured it a little bit and broke it out by lab section rather than the whole course. And there were only 2 sign-up slots available for each chemist, and at that, each lab group only had, I think, 15 to choose from, so a subset of the total list. And that actually improved things considerably. And so I think we got something more like 8 or 10 different groups that were represented, including some LGBT people who weren't previously represented, Native American people weren't, or I'm sorry, Middle Eastern people weren't previously represented. So we got some new people for them to look at their contributions, right? And so this is particularly important in a course like this, I should mention, because surprisingly, for being in the Plains, we have quite a few incoming freshman students from a lot of different backgrounds. There's kind of a misperception, I think, that it's a whole bunch of white farmers. And so, with 40% of the class being non-white, we felt like this sort of activity would be valuable for them. So we went ahead and we asked them, what was the utility in this assignment? Most people, a narrow most people, 53%, said that they found this really useful. Quite a few of them, though, didn't. And so we started looking at the data a little bit more closely to see what kinds of responses we were getting. For the yeses, it was really good. They got to learn about chemists. They didn't know how far-reaching the contributions were. It was more than just the people who were highlighted in their textbook, and it really resonated with them. For people who didn't have strong feelings about it, a lot of that was focused around the fact that they didn't use the information again. And for the no's, was this useful or not? A lot of their responses revolved around the idea that this was one and done, and that they didn't have to put a lot of effort into it.
Are these anonymous responses, or?
These are anonymous.
Okay, so we don't know the demographics of who. Okay.
No, which is sort of an interesting question. And then there was actually a fraction of students who didn't remember doing the assignment, which was, I think, maybe the most troubling thing sort of out of all of it. And so that's sort of what we've learned over the course of 2 years now. The first time we didn't really probe students on the assignment. We just got it up and running. This last fall is when we asked them through the survey tool about how they responded to the assignment. And so now that we've done it twice and have a picture of how they think about it, next fall we're going to beef it up a little so that it's not a one and done assignment. They might have to do some peer review where it's not limited to a single chemist that they're seeing. Anyway, there are some tricks that I think we're going to do to make that experience last with them a little bit longer and maybe make it more meaningful.
So a quick logistics question. Do they take the little slide that they make and present it like at the beginning of lab?
These were actually presented by the instructor and presented before class. So the lecture class in front of the other 120-ish students.
Gotcha.
Which we felt like would encourage them to do better work if they knew that maybe their images would be displayed in front of their peers. And they didn't really have strong feelings about that aspect of the project. So
yeah, just a question.
That might
twice.
be, yeah. Sort of the last thing that we started just this last semester for the first time were these scenarios. And so we only put 2 of these together, and one revolved around female scientists, and the other one was related sort of to
There's a quick question.
issues in, yeah.
So quick question, would it be possible to use current chemists as guest speakers to talk about the human experience of the scientific process, or use the actual chemistry from those chemists who students choose to actually work through in homeworks or exams?
Yes. So the last question is easier to address. So, I've been encouraging the instructor to also use these to motivate new topics, or to use those particular molecules that maybe a minority or underrepresented chemist worked on as examples in class. I really like the homework suggestion. So that's another easy way to put that in there, and I really appreciate that. So I think that's worth trying, certainly. Possible to use current chemists as guest speakers. That's certainly feasible. One of this particular instructor's concerns that resonates, I think, with a lot of instructors is, how do I do this in a way that doesn't eat into my class time? And so some of these projects were constructed so that they dovetail with what the instructor was already doing. And the only drawback to having a live speaker might be that it creates a compromise situation where the instructor feels like they have to move things around, which usually isn't a big deal unless you're the instructor, and then it's usually a bigger deal to them. It's the covering the content issue,
Yeah.
right? But I think it's a great suggestion, and certainly one that I'd be happy to pitch to all of my instructors. So, thank you for that.
If you have questions, feel free to use chat box or just yell at us. It's no problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so as far as these scenarios go, one was female scientists, one revolved around issues that face first-generation students. They were all completely fabricated, but we tried to write them so that they would be realistic and similar to situations that students might actually encounter. And the point of these wasn't to have students present a right or wrong answer to any of the conflict that's presented, but really to start talking with one another and sharing opinions, and then also sharing those opinions with the instructor, who could then have this dialogue kind of with the class as a whole. So last semester we were only able to do one of these, and this was about female scientists and sexism. And in this case, it's...
This one? No, this is the one. There we go.
The text is all there, and it might be a little bit small on your screen since this is being broadcast. But the idea is that it's, for fictitious students in a lab group working on a lab report right before it's due, which I'm sure never happens at all. But
we'll just give you a second to read it if you want.
Yeah. You can take a second to read it.
Take a sec.
Any feedback that you have is appreciated.
We should have planned to role play this.
Hey, look.
I know. Okay. They're probably good now. You can read. All right, keep going. We're all fast readers.
Wow. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down a little bit so that you can see the kinds of things that, we're asking students to think about. One of them is stereotypes. What does that mean? And for most students, a stereotype is a bad thing. It's a negative, and they don't necessarily know that you can also have a positive stereotype. And so we use that as a discussion point, to work with them on, well, what does stereotype itself mean? Why could it be good or bad? Let's see. A lot of what at least these n=2 scenarios that we've developed so far have in common is that we ask them to think about evidence from the conversation and not make any assumptions outside of that conversation, right? To sort of train them, or at least get them thinking about, well, what do I actually know about the situation versus what are my assumptions about the situation? And the socially savvy ones, they're pretty good at that, but in STEM classes, I don't know that we have a whole lot of socially savvy people, including um, so that's been pretty useful. Questions of advantage or disadvantage also come up between these two worksheets. And again, that has a lot to do with evidence based on just this conversation. And we're also trying to get them to think about language and what it means, right? Words are powerful, and not all of our students have experienced that just yet and haven't really figured that out. So we're trying to get that rolling as well. So that's a quick example of one of these. And that took, along the lines with inviting a speaker, this does eat into class time. And the instructor felt that it was sort of low effort because we didn't have to contact anyone and arrange schedules. We could just develop something kind of quick.
Names could be a bit more diverse for both examples.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
That makes me think of there's a paper, and I'll post up the link to it, where they actually sent out resumes, the same, like identical resume, but they put different names on it, right. Names that sound more African American and the names that are typically white names. Right. And the differences in callbacks and things like that was astounding. So names play a big role.
On the other worksheet, I don't know if you have that. The second one.
I don't think.
Oh, okay.
I think I just X'd out of it.
Oh, okay. There was one, I think, that incorporated some foreign names. Like there was a Matthias, like.
That German. Was just on that one.
Oh, that was on that one?
Yeah.
Okay. But yes, some additional names would probably be appropriate for sure. Let's see. So,
I don't know this one or just keep going. We'll keep going.
Yeah, we might just go ahead and click through. So, one of the questions was when we went through the semester and did some of these things, was there actually any change? Did anything happen as a result? And so in terms of naming a chemist, and some of it,
we'll catch that.
And some of it, some of this may just be that they went through a semester of chemistry and were exposed to more names, but it went from 1/3 to 2/3 of the students who could name a chemist, which is an improvement. The thing that was particularly nice is that of those 2/3 of students, not quite half actually named a chemist that lined up with their microbiographic assignment. And so that was pretty good. In terms of how they saw themselves, that seemed to go down a lot. And one of the ways that we're interpreting this is having gone through a semester in college and trying to navigate that. They may not have as much optimism as maybe when they started, which is also not a good thing. We don't want to beat that out of them. But the extent to which that might be tied to DEI or underrepresented status in the class is an open question. Blair's question toward the beginning was, were our surveys anonymous? And they were, and so we can't really link these things, and we didn't ask them directly about how they identify.
Could be the novice versus expert thing where as you learn more, you realize how little you know in total.
Yeah, what a good point. Let's see. And in terms of the vocabulary, part of their microbiographic assignment included a description of what underrepresentation means. If they read it, which they may not have, then they certainly didn't latch onto it. If they did latch onto it, then they didn't remember it. There was really no change. And so I think that we have some more work to do in terms of getting them thinking about the the terminology in terms of DEI and some of these social issues. But those are the kinds of things that we've done. And now that we've collected data, I think that we have a pretty good set of next steps to take. And so, for anybody who would want to do some of these things in their class, and these sorts of things are in the literature, go ahead and make the measurements, even if they're in the literature, make your own and figure out how to adjust accordingly. I think that's probably the most important part.
So I was going to say, this is a good time to take a little break if anyone has a question while it's still fresh on their minds. Kyle's interested for that information.
I would just be interested in thinking about ways that I can ask similar questions in some of the courses that I work with. So, feel free to, set me up on an email chain if you all are discussing.
Yeah, we should send out some links to some of the literature.
Sure.
Stuff like that. That sounds good. Any questions for Drew? I'm going to move on to a geology example, but if you wanted to ask any specific questions about these.
I'm just wondering how your student population compares to the 15 to 14% of students that are sort of aware of what underrepresented means.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one?
In terms of diversity, how does your student population compare to the 14 to 15% of the students that actually know what underrepresented means?
Right.
That's a good question.
So again, the issue there is we didn't ask them in their survey how they identify, which I think was a mistake this year, because that type of information would tell us, is this 15% of the class who understands what underrepresented means, is that only coming from kids who are they themselves underrepresented? With our current data, we can't answer that question, but it's a good one to ask. And just in terms of raw percentages, even the 15% wouldn't account for the diversity that we do see in the class, which is around between 30 and 40% who are non-white. And I think about half the class is female. And in terms of other identification, we don't have those data. But certainly the 15% doesn't account for all of, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's interesting. Good question.
Yeah.
Any others? Okay, so I'm gonna show you an example from, oops, let's do this. We're done. There we go. So this is from the KU Geology Department, and so I'm presenting this, but just letting you know, I did not do this work. This is Jennifer Roberts, Allison Olcott-Marshall, Noah McLean, Gregory Baker, and Andreas Moeller. Those are faculty in the KU Geology Department, and they've put together a manuscript. It's in review right now, identifying how changes that they made in their 2 introductory geology courses impacted inclusivity in their class. And so I'll talk to you about their Intro Geology 101, the way the Earth works. Fairly large class, around 160 to 270 students. It's required for geology majors, petroleum and architectural engineers, and it's also a natural science requirement for our undergraduate degrees. And then Geology 121, Life Through Time, Denated Dinosaurs, about 60 to 190 students, and it's different because it only serves as a natural science requirement for undergraduate bachelor degrees. So we get a lot more diversity in there of types of degrees from students. So starting with 101, prior to 2013, the course was a largely transmissionist lecture course. They didn't do many, it was very rare to have a think, pair, share activity or in-class activities. And grades were just assigned with 4 multiple choice exams and a comprehensive final. They did drop one of the multiple choice exams, the lowest one. But starting in fall 2013, Jen Roberts transformed the course to a more constructivist approach. So students were assigned to groups of 3 to 6 students, and they worked in class to complete worksheets that were based largely in Google Earth. They incorporated clicker questions into the class, and then exams were transitioned to 2-stage exams. Similar for DNA to Dinosaurs, prior to fall 2013, it was primarily a lecture course with grades on the 4 multiple choice exams and final. And then starting in 13, they also transformed it with teams or group work into the class. So teams of 6, daily activities such as worksheets and clicker questions, did 2 semester take-home exams now, and instead of a final exam, they complete a group out-of-class writing intensive authentic research experience called PaleoCon, and that's where they do this public presentation of the research. They've been doing this for a few years now. PaleoCon is fantastic. I'll post up some links so you can like see an article about it, but the students really get into it. They're really excited. Every semester there's someone dressed up as like the animal, that they're representing. It's a really fun time. So I really love the PaleoCon idea. And so when I've talked to both of these instructors, about what really made the difference, they really stressed the group assignments. And particularly the diversity in the group assignments. So just to give you a little bit of background literature, we've seen previously that we get better retention of material from diverse groups. Underrepresented minority students express a preference for group work and get greater satisfaction from it. And cooperative learning improves student performance for female and Black students in STEM courses from Hareid's, I don't know how to say that, sorry, study in 1998. So for both of these courses, they generated maximum diversity using the CATME tool, so the Comprehensive Assessment of Team Member Effectiveness tool. And this tool considers age, major, gender, race, and schedule when making these teams. And there's a screenshot of it there for you if you haven't seen it before, if you want to write it down. We now have this university-wide. A lot of classes use this, but it's just when you think about it, it makes such a big difference. You assign your classes into these groups, but like in Geology 101, like maybe 20% of the class is female. I think that's usually more representative of the diversity. But that's representative of like petroleum engineering and geology. So if you make groups, if you make a group and you just have one woman in a group of 5 other men, that's immediately not necessarily isolating, not necessarily a safe environment. So the fact that we have this tool that can make sure that that doesn't happen really made a difference. And so, table full of numbers. Let me summarize this for you. They basically looked at like 10 years worth of data. They looked at DFW rates. So how many students got D's, F's, or withdrew from the class as a percentage of the class as a whole. And they were kind of looking to say, okay, how did DFW rates change? Ideally, did we reduce DFW rates for these classes after transformation? And highlighted in black for both of these are the ones that showed a statistically significant difference. And so with multiple hypotheses. So for example, in 101, the way the Earth works, they actually saw that male enrollment increased. Underrepresented minority enrollment increased significantly after course transformation. And the percent DFWs decreased after course transformation among females. With Life Through Time, DNA to Dinosaurs, they didn't see this exact same trends, but similar. So first-time freshman enrollment, really there's a big jump there that really increased after course transformation. And percent DFW overall dropped almost 10% after course transformation among first-time freshmen. So they're really targeting that particular group, it seems, in the Life Through Time class. And I'm going to show you another graph that focuses in on those DFW rates in the 101 class. So what you're looking at here is the performance difference between males and females. So the bars that you're looking at show the percentage of females minus percentage of males DFW rates. And that's comparing our 2012 lecture-based course with the 2015 student-centered course. And so particularly what Jen points out in her manuscript here is that in the lecture-based course in 2012, females earned 20% more DFWs than their male counterparts. So while you had a DFW rate that they were overall trying to reduce, they were really noticing that females were really impacted more negatively with this lecture-based class. And when they've changed that, it's made a big difference. So that's just one thing. If it's not a particular activity that you're incorporating into class, this one's more thinking of how am I designing my class so that students feel supported. And then this is one of, so Ward Lyles, he's in urban planning, and he was one of our DEI scholars. Actually, Christoph was too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so at KU we have this new program where we have a handful of faculty each year that participate as a DEI scholar. So they spend the year like focused on working on how they're going to change or transform their classes to incorporate these DEI efforts, and they have this community and team to work with. And so Ward was a part of this, and he's been doing really great things in his class. And so I wanted to show you one of the really cool things that he did that anyone can use is, in addition to redesigning his own course, Quantitative Methods, he actually developed a DEI syllabus assessment tool that instructors and units anywhere can use. And they've been piloting that in their urban planning department, and we now have it available on the CTE website. So I'll show you that.
We used it in chemistry, and I can actually, in a few different courses, and I can tell you it's really easy to use. It's pretty much a checklist when looking at your syllabus. Is it there? Is it not?
Yeah.
So
I'll kind of go.
little plug for that.
Little plug. And Ward's great, and he made us a poster, and I just am like stealing stuff off of his poster. And also, I should say, you know, KU, we do portfolios of faculty's work, and he is actually working on an electronic portfolio right now that'll advertise this stuff in detail of what he did, so that'll be available to look at. But so just showing some examples from his course redesign. Again, this was a Quantitative Methods course. He went with the team-based learning, which we've already talked about how that helps. For his climate, he focused on making formal and informal adjustments by revising his syllabus that we'll talk about, and then including more in-class activities and assignments that foster self-awareness and growth through reflection, contemplation. And he also actually added DEI as a course theme alongside this Quantitative Methods class. So there are 6 main modules that each focus on a core DEI related theme. They complemented, or they also added DEI related text, planning specific DEI related materials like professional codes of ethics, articles, team activities and individual assignments to use DEI examples, cases, and subjects. And instead of a final exam, they completed a semester-long e-portfolio. And again, so when his portfolio is finished, those will be like laid out in detail what they did. So we can kind of post that up so you have that as a reference as well. But here's an example going back to that syllabus. So one of the things he noticed is that just changing what you put on your syllabus can really start that class off differently. If you really make it clear from your syllabus from that first day, you know, what your attitude is, what your teaching philosophy is, and that you care about DEI in your classroom, you care about a supportive environment for your students in there, that it makes a difference. And so he just kind of shows here, you know, in 2016, this is what my syllabi looked like. And then in 2017, I just made these simple changes. One, made it very clear that I was available and willing to meet. He added a teaching philosophy statement that includes his participation in diversity scholars and that he has completed Safe Zone. Safe Zone is a training that you can take at KU here. I haven't done it yet. I'm signed up to do it, I think, in like 2 weeks, that emphasizes these topics. Have you done Safe Zone?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to, did I miss out on anything there? Okay. He added a 4th learning objective that was related to building awareness and critical thinking around those issues, and then he added a bit of color to the syllabus. Is that similar to what you did in chemistry?
Yeah. In terms of the syllabus tool, did you have that?
I forgot to go to the next slide.
Oh.
Sorry, y'all. I got excited. So he created an actual tool, an assessment tool, to look at your syllabus and say, okay, where can I change to make this more inclusive of a syllabus? So this is just kind of talking about, you know, how they're piloting it in the urban planning departments, and then they're sharing the tool, and I'm going to show you it. Where did I put it? Syllabus checklist. So this is on the CTE website. And he has a note here about how they came up with it. Here we go. And Drew, since you've used this, I'm going to have you walk through it.
Let's see. So you can read the letter that Ward wrote that explains the tool, but it really is just basically a checklist, and you just look at your syllabus and address points one by one. So let's see. Where did sorry, it's been a while since I've looked at this. Look at the prompts below and consider your own syllabi. Determine what level most accurately reflects your situation. And so, basically, it's just going through point by point.
So establishing a baseline, if you've never done this before, it'd be worth looking at all of the syllabi to say, okay, where do we all stand?
Right. So most people, at the very least, meet level 0, the baseline, because I think university policy requires us to include on our syllabi information on accommodations, right? Mm-hmm. But level 1, are you mentioning specifically DEI? Are you providing resources that people in underrepresented communities might need at some point? Are those resources clear to students? Some of it is descriptions, and again, in the interest of time, this is on the website, and so please look at it whenever you have a moment. But it was pretty easy to look at our syllabi in chemistry and to start making some of those changes that would actually help. And it also prompts the instructors to start thinking about how they present themselves on the first day.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably the biggest change that has the biggest benefit. So.
And I think one point, so just so I can see everyone, another point I like to make when talking about DEI, so if you put this kind of stuff in your syllabus or the first day of class, you say you're teaching philosophy and you point out how this is important to you. If I go into a classroom and I'm going to do that, I think it's really important that I start out by saying, hi, I'm a white woman. I understand that I don't have to face certain barriers or hurdles that other groups have to face, but I stand here today as an ally for you. And so this is my stance, and this is why I care about this. I have, sometimes you do get pushback because they're just like, oh, well, there's a white guy, there's a white guy up here preaching this to me. And so I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that, yes, I realize what my own demographics are, and I want to change this situation too. And that's what my role is. Just kind of wanted to put that point out there. I think Kyle just had to go. Yeah. Well, so that's the examples that we wanted to show you today within our time frame. We did good within our time frame. But again, that CTE website is up there with additional resources. There's actually different examples of portfolios that kind of focus more on that, or focus more on DEI issues. And next month's Brown Bag will be on universal design, which directly impacts this as well in your classroom. Are there any questions I'd like to end off with? Okay, thank you all for participating.
Thank you. Oh.
Thank you for sharing this.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, I have to hit stop share. I have to hit stop recording.